Season 4 of Notebook on Cities and Culture is brought to you by Daniel Murphy, Polar Inertia, a journal of nomadic and popular culture, online at polarinertia.com, and Medivate, a community and set of tools to help you build the kind of meditation practice you'd like to have, online at medivate.com. What must it feel like to be told over and over again, you are among the happiest people in the world?
I think a lot of, I guess I should speak for myself. I was puzzled by the fact that we were deemed the happiest people on earth. And actually, I think when people come to Denmark, you would expect something different than what you see, because walking the streets of Denmark, you don't necessarily see people cheery and happy and waving their hands. Perhaps we're a Nordic culture, and so we are relatively socially slightly withdrawn. And I think I've actually also been told that the whole issue of happiness, there's actually the wording of the questions can be slightly misunderstood. So it's actually whether it's about happiness or essentially whether you're content with life. I think in many ways it can be understood as Danes are perhaps the most content, and I think that would make a whole lot more sense, because overall I'd say that Denmark has a pretty good social system. We pretty much everyone is taken care of, and of course some of the things that I'm the most proud of when I've traveled abroad and said that I live in Denmark, some of the things that I'm really proud of is the fact that we have free education, and I knew I could always it was always sort of a thrill, because actually we don't even have free education in Denmark. We're paid to go to, for instance, university. We get an allowance every month, and for people in the States, for instance, that was wait a minute, that sounds like some paradise. And so there are things in the welfare system and in the basically in the social structure of the Danish society which really work marvelously. But to say, to go from there and then to the fact that we're the happiest people on earth, to me personally, I think that's a little bit of a stretch, and so I have doubts about this whole thing that we are the happiest people on earth.
Coming to you from the land of contentment, Denmark, specifically Copenhagen, specifically the neighborhood of, let me see if I can pronounce this right, Nørrebro. Nørrebro? Let's hear it from you.
Nørrebro.
Okay, fair. I'm going to work on it all week, I swear. It is Notebook on Cities and Culture. I'm Colin Marshall. Sitting down today with Lars AP, who is the founder of a movement called Flink, and better translation, friendliness, friendly, Flink.
Friendliness. And actually the title is a bit coarse in English, because actually the title of the whole movement is the F word and then Flink.
You can say the whole thing. I thought that was at the title of your book, your manifesto, but that is in fact the name of the whole movement, Fucking Flink.
That's correct. And now I usually have to excuse this, and I think to English-speaking listeners even more so, because that is a very coarse word to use.
Not so bad in Denmark to use that?
No, actually not. In Denmark, it's used as an underlining to if you have a statement and you want to bold it, then you can put the F word in front of it. Of course, it's not you shouldn't say it to your grandmother, but it works all right otherwise. The reason I used, to begin with, I used just the word flink, which is friendly. And when I said this to people said, "Oh yeah, friendly. Yeah, we don't need friendly people. Friendly people are, they can't do with conflicts, or they just do what they're being told."
Weak people, it was thought of. Friendliness meant weakness here in Denmark to them.
That's exactly it. I mean, people. So actually, there was more of a negative reaction to the word flink than there was a positive reaction, and that puzzled me, because I meant, with friendliness I meant being friendly, giving out some of that personal surplus that we, as again, if we go back to the happiest people on earth, you'd think that if we're the happiest people on earth, we individually must have quite an amount of personal surplus, and so so I sort of hinged the whole project on that and said, well, if we're the happiest people, let's use that resource and let's do something with it. So let's start spreading that personal surplus and sharing it with each other. So we're not only the happiest people on earth, but we could also set out to become the friendliest people on earth. And of course, a lot of people have said, well, whoa, that's never going to work out. I mean, there's the weather. There's
It's looking nice now, a little chilly, but I see what you mean. I mean, it's not. I've only spent one night and one morning in Copenhagen, and I wouldn't say that people look especially dour. I don't know. You tell me your impression of the contrast or the shock you think people must get when they think happiest people in the world and they come here.
I think this depends very much on timing. If you come in May and June and July, I think you will actually find that Denmark is actually a wonderful place to be. There's a lot of light because we're relatively far up north. We have a lot of light in the summertime, and conversely, if you come. Actually, Colin, you've been a little lucky because it's a sunny morning this morning, but we're in October and coming close to November, and this is where we begin the darker, not necessarily really cold months, because it doesn't get that cold in Denmark. I mean, compared to Southern California, say, of course it's a lot colder, but we don't get. It's not like we're minus and snow all the time. We do get snow, but the thing is, I think that the main thing is we get a lot less light, and so it's quite dark. And I'd say if you come in the middle of January, you will find that it can be just the weather alone can be sort of a heavy load for you to lift every day.
Is there this sense when the darker months approach that people just collectively they don't get sad in preparation, but everybody feels it coming and they just sort of turn in on themselves a bit?
Yeah, and I actually, one thing that I think that has been. One thing that's quite interesting is, for instance, when you look at interior design, Denmark has done quite a bit with interior design. When you look at, for instance, interior lighting, this is an element that Danish architects and designers have worked a lot with, and there's a reason for this, because obviously 5-6 months of the year we spend indoor, and so there's actually an expression which is or it's a word which is called hygge. Now this is a really difficult word to say as an American, but hygge and it's hygge. That's the way an American would probably say it. Is coziness, and it's something which is deemed very important in Danish society, and hygge is something that you basically do in the winter months, especially. You go inside and then you make sure that together you can have a cozy atmosphere. You can hygge, and that's probably one of the most. It's one of the best things you can say to a host is that, oh, this is really hyggeligt, because you've really made it cozy here. So I think collectively, yes, we value that very much because it means a lot. I mean, you need to get if you don't get the light from the sun and from the outdoors, you need to, in a sense, get the light from each other. You need to get the hygge from each other, and that's where you get the energy.
The noun is hygge. The adjective, hyggeligt.
Colin, you're already on your way. I mean, you're doing really well. Yes, exactly.
And flink, that is a noun or an adjective in usage?
It's an adjective, to be flink. So it's to be friendly.
Now, anybody can watch your TEDx Copenhagen talk where you describe how you got the idea. What circumstances led you to get the idea for a sort of radical friendliness? The most interesting of which to me was you grew up in a bilingual household, English speaking and Danish speaking, and you noticed, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were less friendly speaking Danish. So a little more detail on that. I mean, it struck you as a mystery, and it's going to strike anybody else as a mystery. What about the Danish language feels less friendly to you, or do you think makes you act in a more withdrawn way?
Well, this, of course, all of this, I didn't know any of this when I ventured out on the project. This is something that I spoke to experts about, and it's really interesting. I spoke to linguists, and what I was told is that this is perfectly normal when we switch languages. Language, in a sense, the way you act and a lot of the routines that we use in our interactions are actually they're stooped in language. So of course language is a carries the culture, but what the linguist told me that I spoke to is that Danish. In Denmark, the way we act and the way we are, the way we're polite towards each other, the politeness theories that we use or actions that we make use of, are what theorists call negative politeness. So when we're polite in Denmark, what we do is, I see you're walking along, and I step aside because I can. And what I say essentially is, I can see you're busy. I can see you're in a hurry. So let me get out of your way so you can get on with your things. That would, as a Dane, that would be a polite way of interacting with you, which it is. I mean, that is actually very. I'm respectful of you, respectful of your private life or your, whatever you have of issues that you need to get taken care of today. That's negative politeness. And what the linguist told me is, in Danish culture, this is what we make use of. So when you speak Danish, that's what you'll. That's the bag of mannerisms or cultural actions that you can pluck from. Now, on the whole other end of the spectrum is positive politeness. And when you speak English, and in particular English from and what she said is, it's the nations, the newer English-speaking nations. So that would be the U.S., that'd be Canada, that'd be New Zealand, Australia. In these countries, the politeness that is made, or the politeness that is invoked is the positive politeness. And in positive politeness, what you do, that you just want to make sure that people feel included, and that's pretty much the most important thing. So, if I see you sitting alone and you're reading a book in another language, and that would make me think, well, you're probably a foreigner. You're probably not from here. And in a politeness culture, which is a positive politeness culture, you would then feel inclined to say, oh, I see. Are you from out of town? Are you traveling alone? And if we're sitting here and there's six of us, perhaps we're a family eating out, then it would not be. It could be a quite normal thing to say. Well, would you want to sit with us? Because we want you to feel included. We know the feeling of being alone in a foreign place. So and that we would want you to feel included. Now, for a Dane, that would be with someone using negative politeness, that would be whoa, what are you doing? I'm just sitting here minding my own business. But for someone from a politeness culture, which is positive politeness, that would be a perfectly normal thing to do. Now, because I've been bilingual, or I've been having, I've been using Danish then English to Danish then English. Of course, I've gone back and forth between these two operating modes. And of course, one allows certain things in interaction with other people, and the other allows other things. And what I've specifically felt is that speaking English, I could be much friendlier towards other people, whereas speaking Danish, I felt, I wouldn't say, it's not that I'm shy speaking Danish, but I'm far more withdrawn, or not standoffish, but it's more difficult for me to interact when speaking Danish as compared to speaking English.
It shows an advantage you have growing up bilingual or in a family where there are two cultures, because when I'm learning languages, I didn't start learning languages seriously until my early 20s, so it took me a while to realize learning a language, you're not just learning a language, you're not just learning sounds, you're internalizing a culture. Would you put it that way? You have to internalize a culture to really speak a language?
Oh, yes, and I think that's a really good question, actually, because of course you can speak the language and you can master that grammatically and so on. But in order if you're to speak the language and swim in the culture, if you will, of course you need the cultural aspects as well. And since they're linked to language, I think if you learn a language but don't really know the cultural connotations or the deeper meanings, the cultural meanings, I think you'll probably be. You'll seem a little odd or a little off. So I think definitely that's a very important aspect. And of course, traveling to another country is a great way of learning the language, because you then speak the language the full time. But a very important aspect of it is that you also pick up the cultural references and the cultural connotations. And And I think this is, and you know, it also just makes learning languages obviously a lot more fun when you get those aspects as well.
You mentioned the positive politeness countries or cultures, and you say the new world, the new English-speaking world, U.S., Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and so on. I guess the only one that leaves out of the English-speaking world is England. They don't have positive politeness in the UK?
No, they do, but it's on a spectrum. So their politeness culture is more positive than, say, the Danish or the Swedish or the Scandinavian countries, but it's less so than the newer cultures. It's really important for me to stress the fact that these are theoretical phrases or labels, and positive and negative doesn't mean that one is better than the other. It's of course just ways in which we interact. Brits shouldn't feel disgruntled by this because it's just and it actually makes sense because in the newer world, you could say you've been forced into a situation where you don't really know the people that are around you. You've all moved here, and so you're, it's in a sense it's a pioneer culture. And when you don't know and you don't have your family with you necessarily, or not your whole family, you do need to get to know other people more. So you need to be more open towards other people, and you need to make connections. Whereas if you're of course we're in Denmark is the oldest monarchy in the world. People who live here are or predominantly people who live here have their ancestry goes way back. So we know each other already. If not personally, then we're very much alike. And so the need to actually get to know new people is probably not as we're not forced into it as much. Of course, that's something that you could say maybe 50 years ago. This doesn't work anymore because in a globalized world, we more and more do need to get to know new people, make new connections, and so on. And I think that's also what spurred me on with my project is that we can't live in this way anymore, and we can't. We can't close ourselves off and just think that the people that we already know that's enough. We need to be open towards other people also, definitely.
I'm taking this show to London in January, so I'll put that to the test. I'll see what sort of level of positive politeness they have over there. But you bring to mind a story I heard from a lady who came to Los Angeles from the UK in the 70s, mid-70s, early 70s. And she tells this story. She told me a story where she came to California and she was buying something from the cashier. And the cashier said to her, "Have a nice day," which to us, Americans, is normal, standard. If you don't get it, sometimes it's weird. To her, she was taken aback. "Have a nice day? How could she say that to me?" And it's, to my ears, that's a little bit jarring. Like, why is it weird to hear "have a nice day"? Is that a phrase that would jar a Dane's ears as well, to have a store clerk say "have a nice day"?
Well, I know something that does jar in a Dane's ear is when you step into a store in the States and people say, "How you doing?" Because oftentimes what will happen is, if you get that phrase, and I've actually experienced this myself. I mean, even though I'm half American, when I've been away from the States for a few years, and I come back and someone says that to me, and I'm in a sense, quote unquote Danish mode, and someone says, "How you doing?" I might actually stop in my tracks and say, "Well, now that you ask, actually, I'm doing pretty good. I had a pretty good morning." And then the store clerk he's walking on because it was not really a question. It was just a hello in a sense. And so I think for some it's viewed upon as it's sort of a what's the word, superficial, and well, if you didn't really want to ask, you shouldn't ask. That's the way it's viewed from a Dane's perspective, I think. However, what people then also say is, well, it might be superficial, and it might be that the store clerk actually walked on, but it works because when people actually start the interaction that way, it opens. I mean, it does open. And if you do actually answer the person, he might be a little, surprised. Whoa, okay, I'm getting an answer here from this person. But there was an invitation. So I think what, and this is what I hear from a lot of people who have traveled, in particular in the States, is that, it might be slight, but come on. I mean, it works. It does start something. It starts the interaction in a completely different way, because you could also just walk right straight past each other, which is kind of what we often do in Denmark. And then there's no invitation. Then you really have to, do something out of the ordinary in order to get an interaction started.
You make me think of Japan, where I was last year, in a language I've studied a bit, and so much of the Japanese language, it seems, in interactions, there can be conversations of 5 minutes that go on that are the equivalent of how you doing, fine, how you doing, fine. Just pure formality, almost a pantomime. That seems to lots of Americans strange. Like, how could they say all those things that are just programmed for the occasion? Do you know what I mean? But then, how you doing, fine. That's essentially the same thing, right?
Yeah, I would say it is, and of course there's a level to this, because obviously we don't want it to be programmed, and we don't want it to be phrases that we just use mindlessly, and which become, in a sense, new routines that we don't really think that very much about. But there are things that I think are wonderful that you can bake into the way that we interact. And this is also, I also experienced this in Japan. Just little things, like when at the cashier, if you've been in a restaurant and you're paying with cash. As a foreigner, not knowing the etiquette, if you hand the bill with one hand, then you can see, you did a faux pas here, because when you get the money back, at the cashier, the lady will hand it with both hands. And I actually really I of course, when in Rome, of course I started doing the same thing. And what I noticed is, when you use both hands to hand over the bill, you're focused on the other person. You're there in the now, and it actually does help you to be way more in the situation. Whereas I think mindlessly we can often, hand the bill and almost be checking our emails on our iPhones or with the other hand. So I sort of like that concentration that you can bake into certain routines. But I think that's what we should take away from it, not the mindless phrases. We should take away that we actually concentrate. Now we're meeting another person, so just take that one moment, just concentrate on it. And of course you can't do this all the time. I mean, in a big city, there's lots of people that you meet. You can't do this all the time. But when you do have these little moments, which we could bake in a little meaning into this brief encounter, and I think so. It's a matter of how can we create new routines where we actually do get meaningfulness out of it, and in a sense, how are you doing? It does open doors for meaningfulness, but maybe what we need to remember when we ask the question is we should be ready for an answer, and we should want to hear that answer.
I like that you mentioned the credit card thing or the cash thing, holding with two hands, because they do it in Korea too, and I've studied that language a lot more. I live in an area of Los Angeles that's not majority Korean, but might as well be, and so you see that a lot, and I've adopted the habit as well. And I often find myself doing it in non-Korean contexts, and people don't not take the card. They don't look at me weird because I'm holding it with two hands. And I take it it's the same here. You can import things by yourself, and you generally don't get the stink eye for it, right? I mean, tell me what your experience has been, but when you notice customs of friendliness elsewhere, can you just start doing them here yourself, or is there some sense in which you have to change them, tone them down for Denmark? What do you think?
Well, I think it's like the image that I usually use is when you go on vacation and you buy in Denmark. We usually say you buy like a Hawaiian shirt, and because you look great in it and you're suntanned, and this is it reminds me of vacation time. And you bring it home and you're like, I look like $1 million in this shirt. So you bring it home and I'm gonna wear this. But once you get back and the tan wears off and you're back in your normal routines, that Hawaiian shirt, goes in the back of your closet and practically never comes out again, because what looked good on Hawaii, just in your normal routines, it's difficult to bring it in. But but in a sense, that's exactly what I've tried to do. What I've tried to do is I've tried to say, well, listen, in Denmark, we have certain forms of interaction which are not any longer, or which really don't help us very much anymore. We need to bring it to the next level. And so, how can we do that? And I think of course we can be inspired by other cultures and see what are they doing here. And actually, I am actually quite inspired by the Japanese culture. There's a lot of creative solutions that they make use of, and there's tons of things that you can just by having an outlook that you can be inspired by. But I think also something that's really important is that you look at the ways that we where you might live, the routines that we make use of, and you just think of, well, how can we hack these routines? Just in gentle ways, in fun ways, in creative ways. How can we change the ways that we're interacting, not in disruptive ways? It shouldn't be, because again, we're in everyday life. We need to get things rolling, and we're busy people. So it shouldn't be something where we have to stop and spend 15 minutes on just saying hello. But could we just in little ways, bake more meaning into these social interactions, and that's often done by just minor hacks. And that can make it can really be a lot of fun, and also I think what we can often find is you not only do you bake meaning, but you actually bake adventure into the everyday. And of course, Denmark,
experimentation as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. And so what you find, and I think what you find is you invite the other person with whom you're interacting. You invite this other person to act in a different way, which is fun. I mean, it's like you're playing again, and you yourself are experimenting. So you're not that you're putting your life on the line, but you're putting this little situation on the line, and you're saying, it's up for grabs. Let's do something differently with it. And I think that invitation, what I've found is that invitation, even people who are normally withdrawn, I mean, Danes who are normally withdrawn and where we normally have routines that are, we leave each other alone, we actually really want that, because we do want each other. We do want meaning in our lives. And if we can, and if it's just a little glimpse of meaning and just in a little social interaction, well, that's fine. I mean, because that's what, after all, that's what everyday life is. It is a long string of little social interactions. So if you bake meaning into them and bake fun into them, I mean, that's a good start.
This practice of stepping back and viewing, observing, seeing what you can do to change cultural habits. I mean, that's something that people in a culture, almost by definition, don't do that often. So, growing up, when did you start to regard yourself as having a distinctive position, whether in American culture or Danish culture, by growing up with both of them at home, by having both linguistic sides of it? Did you come to regard yourself as having being a sort of privileged observer in a sense?
I've always, because I had dual citizenship. Well, actually, until I was 19 years old, I was American, and so when I turned 19, I was allowed to also have Danish citizenship. So then I became a dual citizen, and I remember my upbringing when there were a few times in the Olympics and in World Championships when Denmark would play against the U.S. and I would be I would be torn because I didn't really know who to root for. So I mean that's just in a little way. But I think while living in Denmark, I've always felt, it's not like an outsider, but I've felt like I've had an outsider perspective, because I haven't been quite, I haven't been as Danish as the Danes. Whereas when I've lived in the States, and I've studied in the States, you'd think, okay, well then I would feel that I came home. But when I distinctly felt as a foreigner, as an outsider in the States, because I'm stooped in my Danish culture as well. So being there, I would feel more Danish than I feel when I'm in Denmark.
Each country makes you feel like you're of the other country.
Exactly. And in Denmark, actually, when we moved from LA to Holby on Funen, which is like way out in the sticks.
Where in Los Angeles did you live, by the way, for reference?
In Long Beach. So just south of Los Angeles. And when we moved to Denmark, we lived out in the on an island, and it's a rural part of Denmark. And I lived there until I was 20, and then I moved to Copenhagen. And even that little change, that little cultural change from coming from the countryside and then moving to the largest city in Denmark, which is. What you experience there is that there's also culture. There's obviously cultural differences here, and actually, my wife, whenever we go back to where I grew up, where my parents lived, she'll say she senses the change in me. She calls me homo jovialis, and this is a Danish term, but what it means, she says that I become extremely. Jovial? Is that a word?
Jovial is definitely an English word.
Okay. So then I'll say hello to people on the sidewalk. I'll be chatting with people, and she'll
in the
go
countryside.
In the countryside, and she'll where did you know him from? Oh, I don't know him, but he was just walking by, so we just said hello to each other, because that's what we do here. You don't do that in Copenhagen. So even and this is just it's 2.5 hours away from Copenhagen, so it's not a big stretch, but there's cultural differences here, and I think that bilingual, that dual citizen feel, I think there's actually a lot of interesting things you can get out of it.
The difference between urban and rural here in Denmark, then, is almost more stark than the difference between urban America and urban Denmark. Would you say that?
Okay, let me understand you. So that there's a lot. The contrast between urban and rural is larger than the contrast between urban Denmark and urban U.S.
Right, going urban to rural here in Denmark versus going urban to urban, for example, in Denmark and the U.S., or one major city to another major city anywhere else in the world. In some sense, staying within Denmark, going to a different type of setting, is more of a shift.
Oh, I think that's another great question, and I don't know if I can answer that. But
for you personally, it sounds like it may be a little bit more of a shift, because you have roots, in a sense, in the countryside.
Well, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to answer that.
You can say anything you want. It's just to get you started.
Yeah, I think when you I think in larger cities, I think you'll find there's a connectedness of a globalized connectedness that somehow you plug into, and so I'd say on that circuit, going from one city to another, you sort of feel at home in that circuit, but I think that's only one part of the equation. I mean, there's obviously also a national culture that you're still plugged into even though you're living in a larger city or an urban setting in wherever it might be, New York, Los Angeles, Copenhagen, whatever it might be. But I think it's very interesting what you're saying, that there's a difference between the rural area and the urban centers, and then there's also a difference between the urban center in, say, Denmark, and then the urban center in France or the U.S. or Mexico or where it might be. Definitely.
Because, I mean, in America, we always say things like, or historically we've said things like, well, in New York, people are rude and cold. But in some rural state, I don't know, in the South, people are very friendly. Or in Mexico, they'll say, in Mexico City, oh, that's a bad place. You've got to go far south or far north where the real people are. That whole thing. I don't necessarily endorse that view, but every country seems to have it, the sense that, people are colder, less friendly in the city. Maybe because they're all thrown together. Maybe they're all trying to accomplish their own thing. I don't know, but do you get that sense? It seems like you're widely traveled of the friendliness, in a sense, the ambient friendliness drops a bit when you're in an urban setting. Does that hold for the places you've gone?
Well, it's interesting, because when I moved to Copenhagen, I was struck by the I wouldn't say the coldness, but well, let's just call it that. I mean, that you didn't really, the lack of friendliness, let's put it that way. And what I was told by the locals, the local Copenhageners, was, well, this is a big city. I mean, we don't have time we meet so many people during the day, or throughout the day, so we don't have time to be friendly with everyone.
Places to go, people to see, etc.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, come on. I mean, because we've lived in LA. I've spent time in New York. I've lived in Toronto. I've lived in cities that are far larger than Copenhagen. Copenhagen Copenhagen by Danish standards is a big city, but by international standards, it's a pretty small city. So I was like, get out of here. Of course, you're a larger city here, but there's way larger cities. Tokyo, where people are far friendlier than you are, and I mean they find the time. They somehow have a way of doing it. So don't use that as an excuse. And I think that was, I think that's maybe also part of what I was what I've been trying to chip away at with Fucking Flink is that I've tried to say, well, no, this is a national. Cultural trait that we have, and it's worked fine so far. But I think perhaps it's time to update it. I think, and so if whether we're in Copenhagen or we're in a rural area, we need to move forward. And of course, there are differences because what you're saying, about New York being slightly different than Iowa and Mexico City. Of course, places are different, but and even within New York or within Copenhagen, in the boroughs, you'll find differences. So of course there's going to be differences, but here I think it was on a national level. I sensed, or I thought we need to move forward.
In a sense, this is an expression of something you find in every culture, the older the more so, which is that, yes, our practices, our customs we've been developing over the centuries have been working great because we haven't had to interact with the entire rest of the world. Now everybody, unless you're, living in Bhutan, say, or North Korea, everybody has to interact with the whole world. So the kind of thing you are promoting, I mean, this is the friendliness that every people who wants to engage with the world needs, and to an extent, right?
Well, and the interesting thing is, what you see, the places you see culture evolving really interestingly is places where cultures intermingle, and like the music scene is interesting. If you look at folk music in Denmark and you go back historically, you can see that the harbor towns are the places where music has really evolved quite interestingly, because Dutch sailors would come in and they would mingle and jam with the Danish musicians, and new things would evolve. I mean, this is really, really interesting things happen when we coalesce or when we interact with each other. And so what I've sensed is, well, if the better we can be at interacting, the better we can be at appreciating the meeting between two different cultures, or for that matter, two different people, the better off we'll be, and the more interesting things we can achieve together. So, rechargeable batteries. That could be an analogy. When we meet each other, if we can charge each other positively, for sure that would be. I'd much rather that we do that rather than we just walk by each other and don't really charge each other, or for that matter, interact negatively, so that we what's it called when you not recharge but you decharge?
Deplete. Maybe drain is best.
Drain each other. I mean, that would be and some of the findings on that are happening scientifically are really, really interesting in this field, where before setting out on the project, I thought that when we have a negative social interaction, a negative social interaction is when someone flips you the bird in traffic or something like that. I mean, you're driving along and you do something wrong, and so someone gets disgruntled and flips you the bird. That darkens your mood just a little bit, of course, and you might actually not sit up as straight in your seat.
Yes.
So that's a negative social interaction. Well, what do you need in order to get back into the mood you were in before that negative social interaction? I thought you probably just need that, you meet a friend and a friend says, Colin, great to see you. I've actually been thinking of you today. That warms your heart. It brings you, that's a positive social interaction. So now you're equalized. You're back on track. Well, as a matter of fact, what you need in order to get back in the mood that you were in before is you need 3 positives.
3 times as much as was taken from you.
Exactly. Because when the negative social interactions, they work hard on us. I mean, they really make an impression on us. And so we need to shovel coal on the friendliness, if you will. We need more of that. And when if you look at say relationships, and to see which relationships last and actually work well, the ratio is even larger. It's 1 to 5 in relationships that are to last 5 years or more. When you look at in workspaces, in teams that work well together and that achieve flow, where work really starts not being magical, but gets to a second level. You also need to be on a high level of positive interactions as compared to negative interactions. So we need to work on that ratio, and I think that's essentially what I've been trying to do, is to raise that.
You mentioned these compliments, these positive interactions that can recharge your depleted battery from getting the finger on the highway or what have you. But it feels like we have to underscore these need to be, in some sense, honest. If you just compliment somebody's shirt and you don't care about their shirt, it's not going to. The effect on the battery is zero, right? People can tell.
Definitely, and I think also what is really important is, in order to do it so that you don't feel like you're just doing like you're holding the door like you were told you should do, or you're doing the routine. I think the aspect of being creative in the way that you do it is actually, I think, also it's liberating, and it makes it a lot of fun. And
people don't notice unless you are creative. It's sort of like the ad business. You've got to have a new angle.
Exactly. And of course, not so that you should be it shouldn't be performative so that you have to. But I think it's great. It's fine that there are certain things that you can fall back on, and you do this, and that's great. But I just think it's interesting if you can actually also have fun while doing it, and in a sense evolve the ways that we interact. And one of the things that I noticed is, like in school, when you have the I don't know what you say in English, but the bad boy in school, the guy, the sort of
like a bully or a rebel or some guy like that. It's just a bad kid.
Yeah, the bully. I think the bully is a good word for it, because the rebel or the bully. Oftentimes, if you want recognition, or you want to be noticed in class, I remember this anyway. The things that you could do in order to do that were often on the negative side. You would often do things which would be slightly bullish towards other people, and that would be a way that you would gain recognition, or that other people would see you. And I think what would be interesting is if we could start looking at, well, are there ways that we can gain recognition and be the cool kid on the block by doing things which are positive. And I think in order to do that, I think what you do, I think the friendly routines that you start making use of, they have to be creative. You have to think a little bit so that you make them fun, so that the rebel or the bully can start thinking in these matters and gain recognition, but not by being a bully, but by being the friendly dude, and gain respect that way.
And to an extent, the bully must realize that there is some benefit for them in being the friendly dude. If you're the bully, I assume you think, well, that friendly dude he's a sucker. He's not getting anything out of it. As a bully, I can get somebody's lunch money. I don't know, but it's easy to forget. In other words, acts of friendliness do benefit the friendly person as well. It goes both ways. You're not just charging other people's batteries, I guess we'll say.
No, and then I think that's often overlooked when you think of friendliness. You think, well, this is wonderful for the other person, but being friendly is going to cost you every time. But again, when you look at friendly situations, like let's a crowded bus, and all the seats are taken. An old man steps in. His legs are weak, so he steps in, and fortunately you're sitting in one of the front seats, and you see, okay, he needs the seat much more than you do, so you get up and you let him have your seat. What the scientists have found is that the old man experiences what's called elevation, which is basically his happiness level is elevated. That's great. So he got something out of it. The interesting thing is when we measure on you, you experience elevation just as well. So even though you're now way less comfortable, you don't have the seat, you're standing up amid, a bunch of people, you're actually a happier person now than you were before. So being the friendly person actually made you happier. Now, the really interesting thing is all the rest of us sitting in the bus, we're not even part of the situation, we just see it. What happens when you do this is our level of happiness is actually also elevated. So not only do you make the older man happier, you make yourself happier, and you make the rest of us in the bus happier. I mean, that's karma to the third that you, in a sense, spread out. And if you do that in a way which is not routine, or if you do it in a way where there's something that was actually that was a pretty cool way he did that, or that was a pretty creative way he did. I mean, I'm talking about other situations, other interactions. Then not only do you spread this karma to the third, but you actually also get the recognition for being that was a cool way of doing that. That was a creative way of doing that. And that way, I think being that person, it's a plus not only for yourself but also in the hierarchy, or whatever we might call it. You will gain recognition.
It has environmental effects. It's sort of because these actions are going on, the environment around them is also improved. So we need to underscore that. This is by no means, acts of friendliness are by no means of limited impact. It's not simply one-to-one, or one-on-one. There's a wider range to be considered. Ripple, yes.
A ripple effect, definitely.
I couldn't think of the word. You had it there, so your English is not rusty.
I was lucky. And I think also, and this is also something that lots of in work situations that the companies and organizations are becoming very aware of this fact that just to keep a base level of where people function in good ways, it's actually really important to keep this ratio at a positive level. I've actually heard about the Pixar studios, that they are, I've been told that they're actually very influenced by this, and that they look at these ratios with much seriousness, because they know that if their employees are to be as creative as they want them to be, and as they have been historically, they need to keep a really high level. And actually, what I've been told is that the ratio between negative social interactions and positive social interactions is that they're at the level that they aim for is 1 to 6. Now that's a really positive environment, and if that's what they deem necessary in order to be creative and innovative as they've been, I think the rest of us could probably learn a little from them, because they have been very, very successful.
Indeed, you can't argue with their results. But 3 years ago, when you were beginning Fucking Flink, you said to yourself, I presume, I want to start a movement of radical happiness. I mean, how do you begin a movement of radical friendliness? How do you begin a movement of radical friendliness? And what is the first act you take to start such a movement that has now grown larger?
Well, yeah, to begin with, I wasn't really aware of the fact that I wanted to start a movement. I think I did the very traditional thing by writing a book. And as I was writing it, I sensed that, well, wait a minute, this isn't going to change anything. I mean, a book is not going to do it. If I want change, and if I want to create a movement, I need to move myself. And so I think that was the first thing I did, is I started, I stepped away from the desk and out into the streets, and I started pushing myself out into situations that I wasn't necessarily used to. So for instance, one thing that I did way back is I put on what do you call it, a parking attendant? Is that what it's called?
Let's see. I think I'm aware of the story you mean. I think we might just say a parking enforcement officer in the States. We don't really have a good word for it, but a cop who hands out parking tickets usually, right?
Right. So I donned a parking enforcement officer's uniform, and I then patrolled an area in inner city Copenhagen, and instead of giving out parking tickets, what I did is I forged the ticket. So instead of it saying that you've overstepped the time limit or whatever it said, I wrote that. Great parallel parking or nice car wash or things like this. But it was very official looking, and I mean it was just a forged.
Prepares them for the worst at a distance. They think, oh no, this will never be anything good. Not even a possibility in their mind that it's good.
And then there was the ticket, and then I put a 100 kroner bill behind the ticket, so it was just barely visible. And then I put that on the windscreen of the cars. And of course they thought, as you said, oh my goodness, here we go again. And but then they realized, no, wait a minute, I since flipped the routine. So what people expected, they got exactly the opposite. So instead of being fined, they actually got a prize for the great parking that they had done. And I was so surprised by how much you can actually change a situation, because we filmed this we had hidden cameras, so people weren't aware that this was an action or that there was a setup, and it was so amazing to see how people reacted, and of course there was this ripple effect, because then people walking by would see, what's that? The parking enforcement officer and those people, they're standing there laughing. What are they? I mean, that's an odd situation. And so they, then it'd be Tina, we should come down here and park because they're paying us to park down here today. I mean, so it became sort of this bubbly experience, and that was a big eye opener to me, that sometimes just to hack the routine in a radical way, because of course the evening before I was to do this, I didn't tell the municipality that I said it was just a student film, could I borrow the uniform and so on. So I was actually going sort of under the radar, and I did not feel comfortable doing it because I was undercover, and so I actually felt like let's not do it. Let's call it off. But I'm so happy I did. I'm so happy I forced myself to doing it, because the experience of it was such an eye opener. And of course, that spurred me on to do many more of the same kind of thing.
I'm glad you told that particular story, because it highlights what I think is an important element here in this type of friendliness, which is surprise, the element of surprise. Without surprise, even of a very small grain of surprise in these interactions, they're not really effective, are they? You need some surprise involved.
And I think that's what I've been trying to get at when I've been saying creativity. A surprise is a big element, because if you want people to move, and if you want to shake people out of the routines, you need to. I think you definitely, as you said, you need to give them a positive surprise. So of course it should be a surprise which is in no way feels uncomfortable, but it should be a positive surprise which urges them to move into a different realm and take this situation into a different situation. And that's when it can become a situation which is a really meaningful situation, and one of those situations that you'll tell a friend or maybe several friends about, because it's one of the highlights of your day. And we all know this, when you have these little situations that become highlights of your day, they lift us quite a bit. And so it's just, how do you do that? How can you activate that? How can you become an activist for these little moments? That's essentially what I've tried to map.
Before recording, you mentioned that now the Flink business takes up it's full time for you. There's employees. It's a surprisingly large organization that this has engendered. What does the movement have going on now?
Well, right now there's two major projects that we're working on. The first one is we have social media. Of course, is a big new tool that we as humans have, and of course, there's wonderful things we can do with social media. We can podcast, we can blog, we can do all kinds of wonderful things. What we also find, a lot of us using social media, there is also quite a bit of the commentary sections that you just don't go into, because they're in a sense, they're the bad areas of the city. You don't want to go there because you get in a terrible mood going there, because what the hell is going on here? I mean, people are just ranting and so on.
You realize there's so much of the internet you instinctively don't. I mean, for my case, there's so much I instinctively don't look at. Comments. No way. I've never gotten happy happier looking at a comment, at least in most contexts, right?
Exactly. And so in that respect, the social media sphere is a new tool we have, and it's a new area, and we're charting it right now, of course. But there are also areas of it that we just don't want to venture into, and there are areas that we are at the moment charting in unfruitful ways. And so what we're actually doing now is we're setting out to see, well, how can we better the way that we use social media? And of course, I don't think we'll get anywhere by looking at, how can we change the people and how can we change ourselves when we become disgruntled on social media. There's some it's like when we venture out into traffic, somehow our personality changes, or it's as if we allow ourselves to be someone else when we're behind the wheel. There's kind of the same thing going on when we go on social media. We allow ourselves to write things that we would never say in person to people. So there's some really interesting sociological and psychological factors here. But anyway, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create more surplus online, and so this is a project that we're venturing into, and interestingly enough, we've been backed by and we're doing it in cahoots with pretty big corporations. So it's actually this is Microsoft, McDonald's, and Facebook are actually partaking in this. We'll see how it evolves, but the first we're taking the first steps in January. We're on a relatively large scale, and then we'll see how it evolves from there. But I think a lot of people recognize that this is something we need to address and something that would be interesting to do something about, because of course social media, the internet, and so on, we can do and we are doing wonders with it, but we could do so much more.
Tell me if you think this sounds accurate. When we're on the internet commenting alone on our computers, we don't realize there are other people at the other end. We don't realize we're dealing with other people. We forget that because we can't see the people. We can't sense the people, so we become worse. When we're in our cars on the highway, we see other cars, not people, so we treat them like machines. We become worse. In the same way, if we're too embedded in our own culture, too inward, do we become worse in a similar way because the people outside our cultures aren't doing what we expect them to? Do you get a sense of where I'm extending the analogy? Because I'm just barely grasping it myself.
No, I think what you're seeing in the red line that you're drawing here is wonderful. I haven't thought of it of the full aspect of it. I think that's a really interesting line that you're drawing. And I think you're exactly right. I think actually what we're missing in situations like this is we're missing the and this sounds real banal. It is real, but there's really nothing new under the sun here. But it is what we're missing. I think is being there right here and now, and understanding and respecting that this is actually another person that we're sitting across from. Whether there's a keyboard and a screen between us, or there's a windshield between us, or there's culture between us, it's still another person. And so how can we if not break through this, but how can we eliminate the feeling and of the windshield or the screen or the culture, so that we do in fact acknowledge each other? And again, what you said was very intelligent. I'll stay on the banal side of it. But I remember the film Avatar, which one thing I took away from it. I remember is the way that the handshake. Remember that they don't even shake hands; they shake arms, and they sort of interlace something or the other, and then they say, "I see you." Now this is really banal, I know this, but there's something really interesting about that. That just before you even start talking, start interacting, you just take this moment to notice each other, to see each other, and then you get started. Because once you've done that, it becomes so much more difficult to just reel off your this is a machine, this is just another car which is acting like an idiot, or this is just some words on a screen, because no, this is actually another person. And again, that was really banal, but I hope it's okay.
I understand, and that's lots of people have seen Avatar, so they'll know exactly what you mean when they hear that. And finally, I want to know how you think that this is one of your two cultures, Denmark. How do you think the Danish or Denmark itself, how would you hope it will benefit from being friendlier? What does a friendlier Denmark stand to gain, sort of in your ideal imagining? With this place, this people, what would you like to see them enjoy or engage with as a result of being friendlier, radically or otherwise?
Well, see, I think what Denmark as a welfare state, as a social system, I think we've actually as a society, I think Denmark has actually done quite well. I think what we're experiencing and what we've experienced the last 10, 15 years is sort of in many instances, we are at the top of Maslow's, what's it in English?
The Maslow Pyramid.
The Maslow Pyramid.
The hierarchy of needs.
Yes, exactly. And I think, in a sense, what we're struggling with is we more or less reached our goals. And where are we going for, what should the next step be? What I'm hoping for is that we're a country which has relatively few natural resources. We don't have oil, we don't have minerals. What we have is basically, when I grew up, I was told what we have is what's between your ears. I mean, that's what we have to work with. Well, I think we have more than that, actually. I think we also have what's between us. And so what I'm hoping is that if we start cranking up that social thermometer, or if we start giving a little more of each other, I think we can flourish as people, and I think we can become good at interacting with each other. And I think this is going to be something that we are going to see a need for, many other places. I think actually all over the world we need to become better and better at this. Urbanists are talking about the fact that within the next 40 years, we will build as much city as we've built within the last 4,000 years. So, I mean, we're becoming more and more people, and we're moving closer and closer together. And in a globalized world, we're intermingling more and more. So we're going to the ability to do this in a positive manner, I think, is going to be something that will highlight very much within our generation and within the next years. I think this is going to be really, really important. This might not be the ideal starting point. I mean, Denmark, again, as sort of a culture in which we have negative politeness, and in which we have the weather against us maybe half of the year, and where we are a slightly culturally cool or cold nation. So you could say this might not be the ideal place to try this experiment. On the other hand, I'd say if we can do it here, well, hell, I think we could do it anywhere. And so being a small country with 5 million people, why not try it here? Why not see what could happen if we use the resource that we do have, which apparently is that we are among, or maybe perhaps even the happiest people on earth. Let's use that resource, and let's see what happens if we open up the floodgates and spread some of that individual personal surplus towards each other, and become not only the happiest people but also the friendliest people on earth. I think that'd be a really, really interesting experiment. I think we would have a lot of fun on the way doing it, and I think we would benefit on a lot of parameters on our ability to innovate, our ability to tolerate each other and tolerate each other's cultures and so on, and also on an aspect like loneliness. I think this is by being better at interacting and having those, interspersing those little, if not magical moments, but just, slightly happier or friendlier moments in our lives. I think we can actually also perhaps short-circuit some of the loneliness, which is otherwise actually quite a big problem on a societal level. And when you look at the medical bills that are related to loneliness, it's actually quite shocking how much it costs us. So in many different arenas and many different areas, I think it could benefit us if we did some experimentation on this, and that's what I'm hoping we can do.
I've been speaking here in, let me try this again, Nørrebro. I gotta get that vowel down. With Lars AP, he is the founder of the Fucking Flink movement about radical friendliness in Denmark and elsewhere as well. Lars, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me, Colin.
This has been Notebook on Cities and Culture. I've been Colin Marshall. You can keep up with the cultural creators, internationalists, and observers of the urban scene on the show at colinmarshall.org. Thanks. Special thanks to everyone who backed Season 4 on Kickstarter, including Joel Neville Anderson, Daniel Levin Becker, Paige Calvert, Commander Manvark, Jonathan Crow, John Cunningham, David Dawes, James DeVito, Tim Dobbs, Paul Doyle, Jake Elliott, Kevin Emmett, Lawrence English, Jonathan Filbert, Andrew Philippone Jr., Michael Fransky, John French, Themistocles Eucrucius, Will Graham, Umberto Grant, Samuel Hansen, David Hayes, Jeff Hillenbrand, Mark Hines, Andrew Johnstone, Tadeusz Andrzej Kadlubowski, Peter Kavanaugh, Ted Kane, Andy Cooney, Evan Landman, Alfred Lee, James Maloney, Sean McDonald, Alberto Bruzos Moro, Jason Miller, Rob Montz, Daniel Murphy, Richard Nash, Aidan Nullman, Patrick O'Flaherty, Danny Olson, Michael O'Regan, Ian Blosker, Christopher Porter, MJ Pritchett, Piers Rippey, Rob Schultz, Todd Shimoda, Cam Smith, Deborah Smith, Adam Sutherland, Maureen Kincaid Speller, Anna Traher, Thomas Unterberger, Matt Warren, Nick Weigelt, Dion Wolf, Cynthia Yang, and Wayne Wright.